What's going on, guys? Sal here, and today I'm back again Thursday before week 9 of the NFL season. Usually today I try and mix it up, see what you guys want to do. I've done like a game-by-game breakdown last week, done some value plays in other weeks. This week, so I'm just going to kind of tell you what I'm thinking for the slate. What I'm going to do is go down by each position, quarterback, wide receiver, running back, tight end. Not really going to touch on defense too much. And I'm just going to tell you really, I'll point out some values, I'll point out some studs that I like, and just some strategies that I'm using in GPPs or even cash game lineups, just based around the positions and what the slate we're working with, the players, their matchups, and their salaries, what I'm liking this week. So there'll be some values in there, and then there'll just basically be some other things. I'm not going to hit on every single player. I'm going to hit on just the ones that stick out to me, worth discussing, or at least that I've been contemplating, and see what you guys think of those. I want to know what you guys are working through this week in your cash game lineups, what you're going GPP-wise in tournaments to try and get off and get some leverage off of some of the higher-owned players. Leave that all in the comments below. I'd like to just say I appreciate all the support that we continue to get on this channel. The video from Monday hit 1,000 views in like a day and a half, and now it's up to the highest view total that I've ever had, and that's something that I've been working on for months now. Overall on YouTube, and then just in the past few weeks I've just really been popping off, so I appreciate it, you guys. If you could hit that subscribe button if you've been here. I know that a lot of people have been watching without subscribing just based on view count, so I'd appreciate it if you guys can subscribe. If you are enjoying this material right now, you could just hit the subscribe button below the video, or in the bottom right corner you can see that little subscribe button. I'd appreciate that. If you could hit the like button, I'd also appreciate that. It helps us get notified, bumped up the YouTube search engine a little bit more. So thank you guys, but for right now I'll just jump into this, and we'll start right across here. We'll start right with QB position. I think Patrick Mahomes just at the top. I think he's going to be a very interesting play in GPPs because his ownership is going to be similar to what a lot of other people are playing at quarterback. You're going to see Cam Newton probably being the most owned quarterback this week. I think he's a cash game lock with another player who I'll get to at the quarterback position just because of his matchup, his price, and his floor and ceiling. But I think Patty Mahomes is very interesting in GPPs because he still has that ceiling of, as you can see here, he's getting 30 points a week. His average is 30 points at quarterback, which is something we've never seen before. And he's just huge. And if he's going to be getting the same ownership as guys like Drew Brees, Jared Goff, Cam Newton, I think that it's definitely a sneaky play in tournaments. Like I said, Cam Newton in the cash game lineups. I'm going to be playing possibly Cam Newton this week. I'll let you guys know on Monday what I decide. I'm deciding between a couple of other players, but I think he's obviously a clear-cut industry favorite this week, and for rightfully so because of his matchup, ceiling, and floor, like I mentioned. Drew Brees and Goff in the highest point total that we've seen all year. It's approaching 60 points, 59.5 point total. Both of them have great matchups. I think Brees has the better matchup in terms of he's going to be maybe a little bit less owned in tournaments, and I think that the Rams secondary is just actually pretty terrible. I think Marcus Peters, he's ranked 101 out of 117 for Pro Football Focus. A lot of people are going off of his name value, what he did in Kansas City, the big deal that he signed, and they still think he's a good player. Since like week 3 or 4, I've been saying he's not a good player. Devontae Adams ripped him apart the only time he went into shadow coverage last week. He's been burned 5 times for touchdowns this year. Only 6 cornerbacks have done that. Marcus Peters is not a good football player this year. Something's going on with him. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because now he has to shoulder all the weight without Aqib Talib there. I'm not too sure. But Marcus Peters is bad. That Rams secondary is bad. They still do have a great front, though. But Jared Goff going right down, same price range, basically at 6K. The man doesn't move up a lot in price, and I think that's because a lot of people are holding against him what Jeff Fisher did to him basically the majority of his career, or at least his rookie season, and made him look pretty bad. So I think a lot of people still have that stigma in their minds. But Jared Goff also has a great matchup this week. Marshawn Lattimore, Eli Apple out there, but definitely taking advantage of P.J. Williams in the slot. Eli Apple's also not that great. Lattimore's had a very down year as well. Similar to Marcus Peters, not as bad, but very similar to Marcus Peters in coverage this year. Quarterback-wise, that's really all I'm going to mention. I think Mahomes is sneaky, and then Newton, Brees, and Goff are going to be where all the ownership is this week. Primarily, I think if you want to go value-wise, Phillip Rivers is a guy against Seattle whose defense has been playing well, but Phillip Rivers has been playing extremely well. On play action, Phillip Rivers has the best QBR in the league, and against pressure, Phillip Rivers is top 5 against with QBR as well. This week he might be getting Melvin Gordon back, which helps him for play action. People are going to bite more on the run if Melvin Gordon's in the backfield, as opposed to Austin Eckler. He's more of a threat. But Rivers has just been solid, right? He's not throwing the ball nearly as much as he has in previous years, and that's because Melvin Gordon's out there shouldering the load with 20-plus touches a week. Austin Eckler getting his 5 to 7 touches a week as well. But he's been highly efficient. He has the pass catchers out there. He has deep threat guys who can change around the whole stat line in 1 week for Phillip Rivers with a 50-yard touchdown. So I think Phillip Rivers is definitely a sneaky play at his price this week, since he's been a guy who's been constantly getting you around that 20-point mark. At his price, that's definitely going to hit value if he gets you somewhere between 20 to 25 points. Other than that, the last guy I'll go to is opposed from Cam Newton this week is Ryan Fitzpatrick going up against the Panthers. James Bradbury's been a decent quarterback, pretty good, but Captain Motherland in the slot, some of their other secondary guys haven't been that great this year at all. Low PFF ratings, Pro Football Focus. And Fitzpatrick, we can't remember what he did the first 2 weeks. People were saying MVP Fitz, right? And then they put James Winston in, and Winston had like 1 to 2 decent weeks fantasy-wise, but he was still throwing the ball, interceptions, turning the ball over, and that's exactly what he did. I think he had back-to-back weeks of 4 turnovers. They finally pulled him. And Fitzpatrick came in and almost led them to, if it wasn't for the defense, led them to an overtime game and a comeback win. I think we can't forget what he did, right? The first 3 weeks, he played absolutely great fantasy-wise. He played great pretty much in real life, too. The first 2 weeks, had a lot of turnovers against Pittsburgh in that night game. But I think him coming back this week, they pulled him on a short leash against Chicago, putting Winston in, and I think they wanted to do that. I think that him coming back this week against Tampa is a good matchup on the road. You don't like to see it, but he has another full week. He's been the starter for 3 to 4 weeks this year. Played in 5 games now this year, so it's not like he's rusty, this backup. We know what he could do. He has all the weapons there. I think this gives a plus to guys like O.J. Howard and Chris Godwin, who are definitely seem like they have more chemistry with Fitzpatrick as opposed to Adam Humphries and maybe Mike Evans taking a little bit of a hit with Fitzpatrick coming back. But I think Fitzpatrick's a sneaky play, a guy who's going to go lower owned than all those guys we previously said. But he has a good matchup, and he obviously has the offense, and he's done it this year, so why not again? I think this is a way where you can kind of get a cheaper quarterback and a guy with the same amount of upside as some of those other guys. So that's what I'm looking at for QBs this week, basically. The last thing, or that is the last thing, Fitzpatrick. You can go down in there. You can look at some other guys if you really wanted to. Try and find in some value, maybe at Alex Smith, sneaky this week against Atlanta. Nobody's talking about Alex Smith and the Redskins offense because really there's not much to talk about there. AP's been the diamond in the rough this year, a good story this year, but Alex Smith is still pretty terrible. And even against Atlanta, who's had a pretty bad defense, they're coming off the bye, maybe fix some things up. There's not really anybody on that pass-catching game. Maybe you play a naked Alex Smith. Does he get that 3-touchdown week this week? Maybe against Atlanta, it makes sense. I don't want to go there. I do think that's a sneaky play in tournaments, going naked Alex Smith. It automatically gives you just a naturally different and contrarian lineup differentiated from everybody else because nobody's going to be playing naked Alex Smith. But it does have upside this week because of his matchup. Running back, so Todd Gurley, we mentioned the first look, still expensive. His price came down, so you could definitely fit him into your cash game lineups. I think it's smart to fit him in there with the 60-point total game that he's going into. But I think in GPPs, if you did a good amount of lineups where you kind of faded Todd Gurley this week, the Saints do have a good run defense. Obviously, Gurley is pretty much matchup-proof because of his workload in the air, and he faces just so little 8-man fronts because of the wide receivers and Jared Goff and the way that system is run. They audible into running plays when there's no 8-man fronts, and when there are 8-man fronts, they audible out of them. They're very efficient at that. But I think that this is a week where there's a lot of value at wide receiver. You can fade Gurley because there's also value at running back. Fading Gurley, if he's going to be 40% owned in tournaments, naturally gives you a differentiated lineup right there. And basically all you have to do then is hope that the man doesn't score 40 or 30. Even if he scores 30, you start somebody in his place like Adam Thielen, Antonio Brown, any of these top wide receivers who are going to be less owned than Gurley this week by far, and you're automatically differentiating your lineup, right? So I think that's definitely a sneaky way to go in GPPs. As far as cash, I think it's pretty dangerous to fade Gurley just because cash game lineups, probably 60-70% of people are going to have Gurley in that lineup. Since his price has come down, he's just constantly produced. Casual players are going to say, I want to squeeze him in. Guys like you, me, girls like you, if you're a girl watching this right now, you know that you put a little more effort into this, watching these videos, things like that. Gurley's still a great play. So everybody knows Gurley's a great play in cash. I think it's just interesting to fade him in tournaments because one of these weeks he's not going to be on the winning lineups. I think this could be that week that he's not because the Saints do have a deceptively good run defense, and there's just so much value at running back this week, and there's good upside at wide receiver that I think just building a lineup around wide receivers in tournaments, at least some of your lineups, right? If you're submitting a few lineups, it's definitely worth putting a good amount of them without Gurley in there. I think Melvin Gordon's sneaky this week. If he does play, a lot of people are going to see the questionable mark. Not a lot of people are going to own them, put him in their lineups. I think he's more of a tournament play, but he's also a good cash play if you want to squeeze him in. Squeeze him and Gurley in. That's definitely somewhere where you're going to get a lot of touches. You're going to see at least probably 50 touches from those two combined. The next guy I want to hit on, and I do like some of these guys that I'm passing this week. I do like Kareem Hunt's matchup, but I'm just not going to hit on it. I do not like James Conner this week against Baltimore. He played terrible against them last time. Sure, he has goal line upside, but that's about it this week. I do want to hit on Carry-On versus Lindsey. So we saw Golden Tate get moved. All the hypes around Marvin Jones, a good week last week. All the hypes around Kenny Golladay in the passing game. What I like to do around the trade deadline is look at the parts of the offense that aren't getting all the hype but are producing. Carry-On Johnson, 2 weeks removed. I mean, last week they were trailing the whole game, and he still got you 15 points because he got active in the passing game. I think now he's a staple in that offense, even if Theo Riddick comes back. He proved that last week in the receiving game. But I like looking his way because I think it's going to take a lot of ownership off him because so many people are going to go die, especially the casual players, to play Marvin Jones, to play Kenny Golladay. It's going to take a lot of ownership off Kerryon Johnson, who does have a pretty sound matchup against Minnesota, and I think they want to reestablish themselves as a running team. They just got rid of Golden Tate for a third-round pick. And I think they're going to run more 2 tight end splits, which they have been running with Kerryon on the field the last 2 weeks, especially 2 weeks ago when he went for this 158. I like Kerryon this week. I like him a lot. I like him at his price at $5,600. He's affordable. I like him over a guy like Phillip Lindsay, who Phillip Lindsay did have a good week last week, but Devontae Booker still had like 12 to 15 touches last week overall. Devontae Booker also played pretty well. Phillip Lindsay played great, but he's not a guy. He got 18 touches last week. I don't think they're going to keep doing this for him, right? He's not a guy who can shoulder that much of a workload. He's a smaller running back. Devontae Booker did well last week. I could see them incorporating him more into the offense this week because it doesn't seem like Freeman will be back. And he definitely has a tougher matchup. Even though he is at home, he has a tougher matchup against Houston. KC's weak against the running back. I think that's why Chubb had some upside this week. I'm not really playing. I'm going to fade Lindsay this week. I think a lot of people, 13 to 16%, are going to own him this week. Kerryon Johnson is where I would go in that range over him. And I think Kenyon Drake's a sneaky play who's very comparable to Lindsay, the type of backs that they are. They're in kind of this committee with Devontae Booker over there, and you have Frank Gore in this area, but he had a good week his last game on Thursday Night Football, which seems so long ago because of our short attention spans, right? It was like 10 days ago, whatever it was. Well, honestly, it was a week ago from today. It'll be 10 days by the time the game kicks off, it being Thursday while I shoot this. But I think Kenyon Drake at his price, he's a good fade off of Lindsay, maybe even off of Kerryon Johnson. He's going to be very low owned. He has a decent matchup at home against the Jets. He seemed like he was getting more involved in that offense in the last game, got in the end zone twice. In the past few weeks, he's been getting more involved, making more of his opportunities at least. So maybe you see them with the mini buy, basically getting him more involved in the offense, fading Frank Gore, who I think they should be fading out of that offense. Maybe Adam Gase finally realizes that. Adam Gase is just a complete dunce. He doesn't know how to coach a football team. He should be fired. The guy like Kenyon Drake, this talented, should be a guy playing in your offense all the time. It just makes no sense how people don't realize that. Similar to how Aaron Jones should be in the Packers offense all the time. Makes no sense how people don't realize that. Well, people realize it. The coaches don't realize that. It's completely backwards. But I think Kenyon Drake's a sneaky pivot play this week in tournaments. Probably not somebody I'm touching in cash. Kerryon, I would go to tournaments and in cash, actually. Lamar Miller's a sneaky play. He's always been a guy hard to predict when he's going to do well. The last 2 weeks, he's done extremely well in this offense. And I think he's going to continue to do well against Denver, who we've seen get torn apart week after week. Even on the road, I like Lamar Miller in a close game this week. I like him a lot. I think he will get his 15 to 20 touches. I think he might get over 100 yards, and I think he's a very good candidate to get into the end zone this week against a weak Denver defense. So Lamar Miller's a guy that I'm definitely going towards. We just had another subscriber, Keith Barry. If you're watching this, Keith Barry, thank you for subscribing whenever this comes out. I appreciate that. Love seeing those messages while I record. It's honestly cool. It's really cool. Lamar Miller's definitely a spot, but all the way down here at 5,100, Delvin Cook's not going to play this week, or at least it seems. Detroit, yes, they got Damian Snacks Harrison. But basically last week, we saw Chris Carson still have success, even Mike Davis have a little bit of success against that Detroit secondary. The Detroit secondary just isn't good, right? They're not good at all. Secondary, their front, I mean. Their secondary is decently good. Not that great, actually. I mean, I know you have a cornerback out there who's pretty well, but Darius Slay, but you don't have really anything else. But that front's still not that great. Maybe Snacks has an extra week to practice. It'll sharpen up a little bit. But Murray's been pretty productive the last 3 weeks. He did well last week against the Saints. He's getting involved in the passing game. The Saints have a good rush defense, like we mentioned when we were talking about Todd Gurley. He's at $5,100 this week, and it blows my mind how he's that cheap. We see backup running backs being priced up extremely high recently. I mean, you can see it with Phillip Lindsay. You could see it when Tevin Coleman earlier in the year with Freeman being out. They're being priced up extremely higher, and we know that Delvin Cook had a little chance, or a slim chance of playing this week. They said that they want to get him back by week 11, and he's still priced at $5,100. It's dirt cheap. He's almost in the 4,000 range. I like Latavius Murray a lot this week. I'm probably going to be using him in cash, most likely using him in cash, and I might actually put him in a lot of tournament lineups. His ownership might be around 10%, but his upside's just right there, right? So I think I like him a lot this week. And I like his matchup too. So I like where this one's at. I think this is a sneaky shootout potential. Coming down a little bit more, I think McCoy is always a sneaky play, but against Chicago this week, I don't know. I think he's always just 1% owned, and he has the talent to break out, right? Tournament play only for sure. Murray could be tournament or cash game. I think he's very cash game viable. Tevin Coleman's price has dropped, and that's just because Washington has good defense, and he's basically in a split with Ito Judge. I don't want to touch it, but I think in a game that could be a sneaky low-scoring affair. It's not smart to play someone like that. Tournaments, maybe. I'm not on it. Chris Carson's been great, but I think finally this week people are going to be owning him upwards of 15 to 20% this week because of his price below 5K and because of his production. He's getting 25 touches a game, so it's a sharp play to play him. If he's getting that much volume at this price, in cash, definitely a decent option. I think this week is a little bit of a tougher matchup against the Chargers, but Joey Bosa is still not there, so it's definitely doable. They just like to pound the rock. Russell Wilson's throwing 20 times a game, so you know he's going to touch the ball at least 20 times a game. This shouldn't be a blowout in Seattle. So I do like Chris Carson this week, but I can't play him out. I think ownership's going to be higher in tournaments. Nick Chubb, Kansas City's been absolutely terrible against the run this year. One of the worst teams. I think top 2 worst teams in the league this year against the run. This 31's actually. I don't like these opponent ranks. People look at them, casual players, and they're like, okay, I definitely can't play Chris Ivory this week. Which maybe it's not a good matchup. Maybe it's a bad option. But like top guys, like up here. Like if Bell was playing this week, or even Connor, people are going to completely fade him, and I think it's a good option because it's a good defense. But completely fading him, if you're putting in a lot of lineups, this is just not enough info. You have to break that number down a little bit more. I do think it's actually pretty accurate for this week against Kansas City, though. 31st, I think that's right where they are against the run. Nick Chubb, it just matters if they're going to stay close in this game. You have new defense. You have Greg Williams taking over out there. It's going to be very interesting in how they handle this situation, right? Nick Chubb's still going to get the ball. I don't think they're going to give him the work in the passing game. That's Duke Johnson. Even if Duke Johnson's out, I don't think they're going to give him the work in the passing game. And they're probably going to be trailing, so that limits Nick Chubb's upside. But I think he's a guy who's one play away every time. And at his price at $4,500 for a guy who's probably going to touch the ball, even if they're trailing 15 times, upwards of 25 times. I still have yet to think we've seen his breakout week. Yes, he had those 2 long touchdowns in 1 week, but a breakout week in terms of the amount of touches he's getting. He's a 150-yard running back every single week he can go, and he has a great matchup, so I think this could be that week, especially if he gets going early on and he can get a touchdown early on so they're not playing from behind the entire game. I like Nick Chubb this week, so I think he's definitely valuable in cash and in tournaments. Wide receivers, where I have a lot of things I want to discuss, and I'll go through them kind of quickly just for the matter of making this video somewhat digestible, not as long. Like I said, I think the strategy of playing Thielen or guys like Thielen, Hopkins, Evans, those types of guys this week, even Julio Jones this week at 7,900, tougher matchup against Norman. Norman's not the cornerback he once was, but he's held his way against Julio Jones when he was on the Panthers, and they had those divisional clashes twice a year. Julio in their last matchup got the best of him, going for I think 170, but every other time Norman basically held his own. Julio has gone to the longest stretch of his career, 12 games without a touchdown. You'd have to imagine that would break sometime soon. It's hard to predict touchdown variance, but I do think it's this week. I think it's a low-scoring game in Washington, but Julio is just a guy who's in PPR formats, he's always going to be good, right? He's always going to have your 7 catches. Most likely, he's always a candidate to go over 100 yards, get you that bonus. And if he gets in the end zone, he just smashes. At $7,900, there's not a lot of guys who can do that. This week, there are. Since you guys have guys like Michael Thomas priced extremely low, I think his ownership is going to be high. But I think Julio Jones is at that $7,900 price range where people are just, at this point, discouraged by him not scoring touchdowns. But they're basically avoiding the production, right? He's still going over 20 points in half of his games basically this year. And that's because he can get over 100 yards bonus and he can catch 10 balls a game for you. If he gets in the end zone, he's going to go over 20 points. It's as simple as that, guys. So I think he's great value at $7,900. I think going the wide receiver stacks with maybe a Thielen and a Julio this week, or a Thielen and Thomas, is smart. If you get off of Todd Gurley, still getting exposure to that game by Michael Thomas, and then you could even afford a guy like Cooper Kupp, one of my favorite plays of the week. Hopkins, I talked about. If you haven't seen my trade deadline video, you can check that out. Or yeah, the trade deadline video. I think he's a candidate to see even more target share now. Will Fuller's out, and I don't think Demaryius Thomas is going to get open to take away some of those targets. Going down a little bit, Robert Woods. All these Rams wide receivers, all the Saints wide receivers this week are great plays. Obviously, the Rams wide receivers are a little bit better. My favorite play of the week, though, is Cooper Kupp at $6,000. He has the best matchup against P.J. Williams. Robert Woods is going to see Eli Apple, and Brandon Cooks is most likely going to see Lattimore out there in New Orleans. So I think Kupp has the best matchup, has the highest floor out of these guys, and potentially a higher ceiling this year based off of how much Jared Goff is looking at him. High total game. I love him a lot. Emmanuel Sanders is where I want to focus on this week, though. I love Emmanuel Sanders the same reason I love Kerryon Johnson this week. Everybody and their mother and their father and their daughter, their son, whatever. Everybody's playing Courtland Sutton this week. In cash, I think that's a smart move, right? $3,900, you know he's probably going to be seeing 7 to 10 targets this week, probably going to catch 5 balls this week, and he has touchdown upside, right? He's been playing great this year. They want to get him on the field. Maybe he runs 90% of the plays this week, 90% of the snaps this week. I love him in cash, right? But if 40 to 50% of people are going to play him in tournaments, and literally 40 to 50% because he's so cheap and he has the upside of a wide receiver 1 this week, I might fade him. I'm not going to totally fade him because I think he has that upside. That's why I'm playing him in cash based on his price, right? If he gets you 15 points, that's great at 3,900, and he has the upside to get you 30 points this week. It's not even a question about it. But with so many people playing him 40 to 50%, if you can get lineups with Emmanuel Sanders, who is probably still the better receiver, maybe not long-term there, but right now he's the favorite target for Keenum. He's the most explosive guy out there in this offense. If he's healthy and he's playing out there, nobody's going to be owning him. Nobody's going to put Sutton and Sanders in their lineups, and the majority of people are going to put just Sutton in their lineups because of the price value and because he's that sexy play right now after the trade deadline. I could see Sanders going under 5% owned. I could see him going under 3% owned this week, which is crazy based on what he's been doing, right? 9.1 in a week where he was hurt. 30, 27, 16, 11, 18, 13, 32, right? His floor is basically 12 to 15 points with his ceiling in the 30s, averaging probably, what, 20 points this year? Let's see what they have him at here. Emmanuel Sanders, averaging 20 points, 19.9 points this year. That's insane for a guy who can potentially go under 5% owned with the upside of scoring 30 to 35 points. I'm going to be playing a lot of him in GPPs, maybe not so much in cash because I do think Sutton's the better play overall in cash, but you have to take ownership into account. If Sutton somehow lays an egg, which is still possible this week, and laying an egg could be 5 to 10 points in a GPP. If he lays an egg at 5 points and 40% of the field has him, 40% of the field basically then has low upside of winning the tournament, and you have a guy who, like Sanders, who if Sanders goes up for 30 points, that means you're getting basically double the points. You have Sanders when nobody has him, and you faded Sutton when everybody has him. It puts such a wide gap between the people who can't win and you. So basically, you're going to be high up in there for a potential winning spot. I think I love Sanders this week a ton. Probably one of my favorite plays of the week. In similar fashion, guys like Marvin Jones, Golden Tate not playing this week. He's on this stack, but he got traded. Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay, I think, are going to be popular picks. I like Kenny Golladay more, both short-term and long-term. I think a lot of people are going to look at Jones' good week last week. He's going to get Xavier Rhodes this week. That's a tough matchup. I do think that game has sneaky shootout potential. I do like Brandon Powell in the slot if that's who's going to be starting there over TJ Jones. I think that's a sneaky play at $3,000. I think a lot of people aren't going to go there. They're going to go more towards Sutton again. Not a lot of people are even going to know who Brandon Powell is. But you guys will now after you watch this. And I do like Kenny Golladay a lot more. I think a lot of people. He's only had 3 targets in the past 2 weeks, but he's averaging 8.2 targets on the year. I think he's going to regress closer to that side. I think his touchdown regression is going to go up since he's had like 2 called back, 1 tackled at the 1-yard line. So I do like him a lot there as well. Going down more, I think there's a lot of value under $5,000 this week. Kiki Kude is a guy I think I like as well. But under $5,000 is a lot of value. Sammy Watkins, I don't think he's going to repeat last week, but I think he's a candidate to do so. Priced up a little bit, but still affordable. The Dolphins wide receivers, if Kenny Stills is out, I don't think he practiced again today on Thursday. I do like Amendola and Parker. Parker's going to have the higher ownership. He's a guy who can stretch the field. Amendola I do like as a sneaky play who's been consistent basically the last 3 weeks, getting targets and receptions with Osweiler in the starting lineup. And then Parker's a guy who blew up on, he's had a chip on his shoulder. His coaches have been trying to trade him. His coaches have been basically openly bashing him. He's a talented receiver, and on a main slate game, on a Thursday night game, he basically blew up for 140 yards, 130 yards. I don't think he's going to do that again, but he has a decent matchup against the Jets, so I don't see it not happening. Godwin's a guy I like more with Fitzpatrick, but he burned me last week. He's just a guy who's going to be very limited on his snaps. He shouldn't be limited on his snaps. They should free him and stop playing Deshaun Jackson, but they don't. So Godwin has low upside. DJ Moore's the guy I love. Torrey Smith didn't practice again this week, and if he doesn't play, DJ Moore I think is a lock for me. I think DJ Moore is going to be where I'm going with Emmanuel Sanders to get a cheap wide receiver, but still fade Cortland Sutton. In cash, I like going DJ Moore and Cortland Sutton. I like doing both those options to afford guys like Todd Gurley, to afford guys like Melvin Gordon, hire Cam Newton, guys like that. DJ Moore is somebody great to stack with Cam Newton, as is Greg Olsen. But free DJ Moore. They said in conference that they want to get him more involved in the offense. I think that's smart because he's an explosive kid, the rookie. He's been playing great the last few weeks. And last week when he had more run, he ran on like 70 or 80, or I think it was upwards of 80% of the snaps last week because Torrey Smith was out. He was running closer to like 60% of the snaps with Torrey Smith in there. Torrey Smith looks like he's going to be doubtful again this week. So I like DJ Moore a ton. I already touched on Sutton, who's about that 3,900 range. I think Traquan Smith's a decent play. I think he gets about 7 targets this week in a high-scoring game. I think he could take one deep against a bad Rams secondary, an overrated Rams secondary. Not too much to dive into there, though. I do think he's a good play. Willie Snead and Kearse, they're just in this range of guys with low ceilings and decent floors. Snead, again, had 11 targets last week. He'll get you 10 points. He probably won't get you 20. Upside of like 15 for Willie Snead if he gets in the end zone. 10 points is where he's at, catching 5 balls for like 50 yards a week. So he does have that if you want to play him in cash, but in GPPs, I don't want to play a guy like that, right? Sutton, like I said, he's going to be the hot topic this week, and rightfully so because of his upside, because of his price. You guys know where I stand on that. I like him in cash, and I like Emmanuel Sanders a little bit more in tournaments. But I'll have my fair share of both of them. Jakeem Grant, if Kenny Stills is out again, Jakeem Grant is a great play. It's as simple as that. I mean, we said Danny Amendola, but Jakeem Grant got 8 targets last week. If he gets a touchdown at 3,700, 13 fantasy points. We saw last week Anthony Miller did it. That's great value. That's enough to win you a tournament, a milli maker. And he's a guy on special teams who could take one back as well. He's a talented player. Rashad Higgins played this week. Definitely somebody to keep an eye on for a game where they're probably going to be trying having to throw the ball at 3,700. So there is value down here with Anthony Miller. Again, I don't know if I want to touch that in Buffalo, but there is value at Jakeem Grant, Rashad Higgins, Cortland Sutton, and DJ Moore. All have upside at 4,300 and below. All have pretty decently high ceilings. Maybe not Rashad Higgins, but the other ones do. I like that a lot this week, all those guys that I mentioned, and I like Julio Jones a lot at 7,900. Tough matchup because, hey, basically, I think that's going to be a low-scoring game. I think it's going to hit the under in that game. If you want a betting play, I think that game's going to go under. But off the bye, I think that they're going to come out, they're going to throw the ball, and I think they're going to be able to move the ball on the road. I do like Julio Jones to go over 100 yards, probably 6 to 8 catches this week, and maybe get in the end zone. I'll call it right here. Bold prediction, Julio Jones gets in the end zone. It's nuts to say that's a bold prediction coming into Week 9. We'll finish it up with tight ends. Defenses is not much I really want to talk about ever. I like to pay cheap at defense, even if the Bears are playing Nate Peterman this week. 4,100 is a lot of money to spend. It allows you to go up and get a better quarterback if you fade them. The only other thing that I'll say is basically tight ends. David Njoku is kind of like my lock button this week. The Chiefs have been averaging, giving up 8.2 targets, and this is I'm taking this from Ian Harditz. He writes for the Action Report Fantasy Labs. He's great. He comes out with a matchup manifesto every week, and he comes up with some other plays. Go and read him on Fantasy Labs. Go and read him on the Action Report. Follow him on Twitter. It's great. He put out a stat that the Kansas City Chiefs, they're giving up 8.2 targets a game to tight ends, and they're giving up 76 yards a game to tight ends. David Njoku laid a goose egg as a chalk last week. That's going to make a lot of people come off of him, not only in tournaments, but in cash as well. I think his price at 4,600 is pretty reasonable for a guy who before last week was averaging 9 targets a week at tight end. An athletic guy who can catch the ball around the end zone. Has the best matchup this week. He's literally my lock button at tight end. I can see if you want to go Greg Olsen, because Greg Olsen's literally been playing 99% of the snaps. Has a great matchup this week. And if you want to stack him with Cam, that's also a great option. I think that will be heavily owned in tournaments. But as far as cash, that's a great option. Other tight ends, I mean, if you want to go value at the tight end mark, I do like Kyle Rudolph. He's seeing consistent targets in a game that could be a sneaky shootout. But other than that, value-wise, if you want to come all the way down here at 2,500, Gesicki has been getting constant targets, but he's just not a guy who can get he gets deep down the field, but he's not a guy who can get a lot of upside because he's not seeing a ton of targets like a guy like Njoku seeing 9 targets a game before last week is. But at 2,600, he's a guy who can get you 10 points. If he just catches like 5 balls or if he falls his butt in the end zone, he's definitely seeing targets out there. Other than that, though, there's not a lot. Ben Watson in a high total game, he's going to be pretty cheap at 3,200. Nobody's going to be playing Benjamin Watson this week, but he's a guy who can always get into the end zone. He's a guy who will probably see 4 to 5 targets this week. I like him in that game where Drew Brees last week, he only threw 23 times. I think he's going to be throwing closer to 40 times this week. Other than that, tight end's pretty tight this week. A ton of people I always want to play Travis Kelce. Great matchup again against Cleveland, who's been notorious the last 2 years for giving up big points at tight ends. Kelce's a guy whose his floor is basically 10 to 15 points, right? And if he gets in the end zone, it's going to be 20 to 30 points. But this week, it's going to be David Njoku. O.J. Howard, I touched on in my first week. I think he's always a value play with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think his ceiling is elevated and his floor is just because he'll get more targets. But he's running limited snaps with Cameron Brate out there, running more snaps each week. That's why I like guys like Njoku and Olsen who are running majority of snaps more this week. But I do like O.J. Howard. That about wraps it up. I just want to discuss some things that I like this week, whether they're values or just studs or just ways that I'm going in tournaments. Not sold on them. Hope you guys take value from this video. I appreciate it if you can drop a like, drop a comment. Let me know what you think about these videos. It's Thursday here, so a lot of things are going to change with the injury reports are coming out. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. It's in the bottom right corner right here, wherever it is. I think it's going to be like down here. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I appreciate it. Hit the like button, comment, share, whatever you guys got to do. My name's Sal. I appreciate it. Good luck this weekend. Be safe, everybody. Be good. Peace.